So here's a quick overview of post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of us are incredibly lucky. We can actually live our life through without ever having to experience a trauma or having our lives put at risk in any way, shape or form. Never truly needing to learn the valuable skills of how to control anxiety. That said, everybody at some stage or another could allow an experience to become a trauma. I recently lost my father, and although it was a very sad time for us, he was 81 and he'd lived a very full and happy life. For some people, the loss of a loved one can become so intensely emotionally charged that it creates for them a trauma that deeply affects them ongoing thereafter. I've driven motorcycles all my adult life, and on 5 occasions I have literally stared into the jaws of death. The worst accident I had broke my femur. Now, the intensity of the moment, the terror, and possible consequences and threat to life could have created for me a trauma. I have known many friends who have experienced less, yet suffered ongoing anxiety because of it. Never to ride a bike again. If the anxiety is severe enough, it will become debilitating and can severely limit a person's ability to lead a fulfilling and enjoyable life. There is risk all around us. Our everyday actions, crossing the road, cycling a bike, walking the streets late at night. For the few who are blissfully unaware, they can manage to lead a somewhat charmed life. For others, who have maybe been attacked or injured in some way but have managed to emotionally reconcile the experience, they fortunately managed to gain a wisdom or a meaning from it, which allowed them to move on from it. For others though, the emotional neurological connection between fear and the event is too strong. They can then unconsciously feed it and create a hyper sense of anxiety associated to it. Now, this is where they can develop post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's absolutely no predicting who it will affect and what level of trauma can create this neurological connection. And PTSD affects the person deeply on all levels, physically, psychologically and emotionally. And it tends to, in more cases than not, be diagnosed in the person who actually experienced the trauma firsthand. Though there are many cases of it being diagnosed in people who witnessed the trauma. Reports of a sense of helplessness, inadequacy or guilt can also be experienced. This traumatic stress disorder rarely corrects itself. It can affect a person for many years, even for a lifetime. They're left able to be instantly triggered into the same intense emotional state from a passing thought or a comment. Now, note also there's a big difference between associating into a past intense emotional experience and post-traumatic stress disorder. Simply revivifying that intense emotional feeling is not PTSD. Traumatic stress disorder is significantly more intense than unconsciously revivifying a negative emotion. Some of the most common symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder are nightmares and flashbacks. It is well documented that an individual suffering from PTSD will consistently reimagine the event. And they do it so vividly that they actually, to all intents and purposes, relive the experience, often on a nightly or daily basis. Highly evolved unconscious triggers, like the stimulus response associated to a phobia, those suffering from PTSD will have triggers that fire the response every time. Now, often these stimuluses are directly related to the trauma. Things like loud noises, enclosed spaces, issues with personal space. Even physical touch or intimacy can instantly access the intense anxiety and fear. There'll be present irrational beliefs that it will all happen again. All kinds of panic attacks, including the ones associated to PTSD, will have an association to it all happening all over again. Part of that fear that feeds anxiety comes from the repetitive nature of revisiting the event day in, day out. This can build a psychological expectation that it will be there waiting in the future for them. This works on the premise that our neurology doesn't know the difference between imagined and real. So it is constantly being programmed to expect to experience it again in the future. Now, this repetition unfortunately does actually increase the odds of it actually happening again in the future. You can find out more about that in the full online training. Now, sufferers will also have a difficulty coping with normal life. PTSD can be all-consuming, with little mental horsepower left for anything else. Sufferers of PTSD can be remote and detached, finding it difficult to engage, emotionally numb, and seemingly self-absorbed. They can create complexes around health with an irrational fear of dying. They can also get stuck in their own head with endless negative what-ifs. Someone suffering from PTSD can also be short-tempered and intolerant, easy to anger and aggressive. Also, at the opposite end of the spectrum, they can be hypervigilant, easily startled like a scared rabbit. As with all of these anxiety disorders, relaxing in any way and sleep will be difficult for someone who has traumatic stress disorder. Find out 3 powerful tips that you can apply today by signing up to my free introduction training.